Welcome to Get Licensed to Build. This is a free online workshop for those who want to get their California contractor's license. Our goal this morning is to go through all the parts of the license application and give you practical tips to help you complete it correctly, and to give you every opportunity to demonstrate your experience and qualifications to get your California contractor's license. We will also help get you ready for your licensing exams and give you a link to a video that shows you exactly what to expect on your test day. Today's webcast is presented by the Contractor State Licensing Board, the government agency responsible for regulating the California's construction industry. I'm Ronald James from CSLB License Verification Unit at CSLB. Joining us is Dana D'Onofrio from CSLB's License Verification Unit. Good morning.
Good morning. CSLB is overseen by a 15-member board that directs administrative policy for our operations. Our board is made up of 10 public members, including one labor representative, one local building official, and one representative of a statewide senior citizen organization, and 5 contractors. Appointments are made by the governor and the state legislature.
Please note, CSLB authorized test centers are open. It is recommended that applicants wear masks on test day. Before arriving for your test, check and follow your local COVID-19 mask guidance. If you are watching right now on either YouTube Live or Facebook Live and want to ask questions, you'll need to join us on WebEx. There's a banner with a link on the top of our homepage, www.cslb.ca.gov. That is also where you can download this presentation to follow along. The presentation file includes clickable bonus links that appear on slides throughout this workshop. We're going to present a lot of information today, so don't worry if you don't get it all. We will archive the video of this workshop and put it on our YouTube channel so you can go back and watch again. To ask a question on WebEx, use the Q&A feature, not the chat feature, on the bottom right of your screen. Make sure you send your questions to all panelists. Finally, we tend to get a lot of questions during these workshops on how you document your work experience and what credit you can get for your education or military service. Those questions are fine, but we will ask that you wait to send us those questions until after you see that part of the workshop. We will go through your questions at the end of our presentation, which should last about 45 minutes.
The information obtained during this webcast is not, nor is intended to be legal advice. While this webcast contains general information, including legal guidelines for contractor license applications, it does not contain definitive statements of the law and may not reflect the most current legal developments in the construction industry. Such guidelines communicated or discussed during the webcast are for informational purposes only. If you have questions about the application of the law for specific situations, you should contact an attorney who is familiar with California construction law or review the 2022 edition of the CSLB publication, California Contractors License Law and Reference Book. You can download it for free on the CSLB website or purchase it directly from the publisher, LexisNexis. There are links for both at the bottom of the screen.
Here's a list of what we're going to cover today. We will take you through the process of applying for your California contractor's license. First, who needs a license? Why get a contractor's license? The minimum qualifications you'll need to get a license and what credits you might qualify for. The types of business entities, the different CSLB license classifications, including our new B2 residential remodeling classification. We will spend a lot of time giving you tips on how to help fill out your applications, including how to demonstrate your work experience to meet the minimum qualifications. Fingerprint requirements for a criminal background check. We will help you exams you will need to pass in order to get your license. And finally, the other things you'll need to have in place before your license is issued, things like a bond and insurance.
First, we'll take a look at who needs a license. Here in California, a state contractor's license is needed for all construction projects priced at $500 or more. That total includes both labor and materials. The law doesn't let you break down a project into 499 pieces. It's the entire project. Also, you cannot charge an hourly rate to get around the $500 threshold. If the hourly cost times the number of hours for the job totals $500 or more, you need a contractor's license. So what is the definition of a contractor? The definition comes from the state's Business and Professions Code. In this case, it's section 7026.1. We've got a link to the code at the top of the page if you download the presentation. I'll read the entire code, but pay special attention to the part we underlined. A contractor is any person, consultant to an owner-builder, firm, association, organization, partnership, business trust, corporation, or company who or which undertakes, offers to undertake, purports to have the capacity to undertake, or submits a bid to construct any building or home improvement project or part thereof. In other words, you don't have to do the work to break the law. You must have a contractor's license just to advertise that you can do the construction work, or even to give a bid for a construction job if the bid totals $500 or more.
So you may be asking yourself, why should I get a license? Here are a few good reasons. First, you can take pride in being a licensed professional. It shows you've taken the steps to get licensed and you're serious about your career choice. It allows you to make valuable contributions to your local community. Unlicensed contractors must operate in the shadows and cannot help make their community a better place to live. Next, it allows you to get paid for the work you do. There is value to the work done by a licensed professional. Being licensed also gives you a legal option if customers don't pay you. Unlicensed contractors do not have a legal right to take someone to court to get paid because the work required a license and they weren't licensed to do the work in the first place. Also, you would be able to use the mechanics lien laws. Next, you don't have to look over your shoulder with fear of getting caught. Contracting without a valid California license can lead to misdemeanor charges. Those caught face a first offense sentence up to 6 months in jail and or a $5,000 fine, and potential administrative fines anywhere between $200 to $15,000. Subsequent violations can result in increased criminal penalties and fines. In addition, you may face felony charges if you contract without a license when one is required in a state or federally declared disaster area, or if you try to pass yourself off as a licensed contractor by illegally using a license number. Remember, there are no educational requirements to get a license. Also, you do not have to go to a license preparation school to get your contractor's license.
So, what do you need to get your license? First, it is important to understand that CSLB does not license individuals. We license companies or businesses, also called entities. Many entities are one-person operations, but know that every entity, even a one-person operation, must have a qualifier. That's someone who has the minimum experience and is responsible for the operations of the company. Here's a short list of minimum qualifications you will need. You must be at least 18 years old. You must have either a valid Social Security number or valid Individual Taxpayer Identification Number, or ITIN. You can qualify the license in one of two ways. First, you can qualify the license by having at least 4 years experience within the last 10 years as a journey person, foreperson, supervising employee, or contractor in the trade being applied for. Or you can also get a qualifier for the license who has that required experience. We will spend a lot of time talking about how you can demonstrate your experience on your application in a few minutes.
It may be possible for you to substitute your education, technical training, apprenticeship training for some of the required experience. We tend to get a lot of questions on this. First, CSLB cannot prejudge your experience. Due to the number of applications we receive and process every month, we don't have the staff time that would be needed to prejudge your experience. We can only review your documents after you apply for your license. Next, to get education credit, the coursework must be directly related to the work you will be doing as a contractor. Your education cannot be substituted for more than 3 years or 36 months of the required experience, meaning you will need at least 1 year of practical experience if you get the full 36 months of education credit. To apply for education credit, you must provide CSLB with written documentation. That means a copy of any apprenticeship completion certificates you earned, or get official technical school or college transcripts. Have the transcripts mailed to you. Do not open the envelope. Leave it sealed and include it with your CSLB application packet. Note that high school courses will not earn you any credit toward your contractor's license.
If you're looking to get education credit to meet the 4 years or 48 months of experience, you'll need to get your transcripts first. This is the most important slide of this entire workshop. This is the kind of credit you can expect to receive for your education. Note that for some areas, we are only giving you averages. You will see that your credit will be determined on a case-by-case basis. We're not going to be able to give you any more guidance than what you see on this slide. So our best advice is do not rely on the combination of your experience and education credits to barely hit the 4-year experience mark. There is always the real possibility you will not get as much education credit as you are hoping. Let's go through the chart from the most credit you can get to the least. The most education credit you can get is for a Bachelor of Science degree in construction management. That degree will get you the full 36 months of credit. Next is a master's or bachelor's degree in business or a law degree. Any one of those will get you 24 months of credit. An associate in science degree in construction management will get you 18 months credit. A bachelor's degree in some other major will get you an average of 18 months credit. An associate degree in a major besides construction management will get you an average of 6 months credit. Credit for individual college classes are given on a case-by-case basis, usually with a maximum of 6 months credit. Apprenticeships completion certificates will get you 24 to 36 months, depending on the classification of the program. For example, a sheet metal worker's apprenticeship can get you 24 months credit for the C20 HVAC and C43 sheet metal classifications only. A lineman apprenticeship gets you 36 months in C7 low voltage or C10 electrical classifications only. If you have transcripts for other technical training you've taken, you might be able to get some minimal credit as well. Again, don't use your education credit to try and squeak by the 4-year or 48-month requirement.
If you served in the military, some of that service might count as well. On the bottom of the page, you'll see a bonus link to our CSLB Military Application Assistance Program where you can learn more. The license qualifier also must pass 2 different exams, both taken on a computer at one of CSLB's authorized test centers. One exam is on California business law. The other is on the specific trade covered by the license. We also have limited specialty license, which we will discuss later. Those licenses only require the qualifier to take the law and business exam. As we mentioned, the qualifier is the one who must take and pass the required exams to qualify for a waiver or qualify for a waiver. We're not going to spend a lot of time on the waiver, only to note that you might be able to request a waiver from taking one or both exams in very specific situations. We recommend that you look at the CSLB website for more information on those specific situations. We have included a bonus link at the bottom of the page. The qualifier must also undergo criminal background check. We will go more in depth on that in a few minutes. After the license is issued, the qualifier must be in a position to exercise direct supervision and control of the company's operations. They are also responsible for all workmanship issues. It is also important to note here that if you're trying to get a B general building contractor's license and you hire subcontractors to work under you, you are responsible as the project's prime contractor for the work that they do.
The next thing you're going to need to determine before applying for your license is which type of entity your business will be. There are 4 types. First is a sole ownership, where the owner or responsible managing employee may serve as the license qualifier. Just about 2/3 of the contracting businesses in California are sole ownerships. Second, a corporation, where either of the current officers designated as a responsible managing officer or the responsible managing employee may serve as qualifier. Just under 1/3 of our licensees are corporations. A distant third is a partnership, where either of the general partners or a responsible managing employee may serve as qualifier. That's 2% of our licensees. Finally, a limited liability company or LLC, responsible managing member, responsible managing manager, sponsor, or responsible managing employee may serve as qualifier. About 1.5%, 1.5% of California construction companies are LLCs.
Now let's talk about license classifications. A contractor's license can include multiple classifications, although you must select one when filing your application. While there are more than 40 license classifications in California, they all fall under 3 distinct categories. There is a bonus link to our classification list at the bottom of the screen. First is Class A, or General Engineering Contractors. These are contractors who deal with fixed works that require specialized engineering knowledge and skill. A contractors are the ones who build projects such as freeways, skyscrapers, and dams. Today, there are over 19,000 A contractors in the state. Next is Class B, or General Building Contractors. This is the largest class of contractors in California, with more than 133,000. B contractors have a principal business dealing with any structure built, being built, or to be built that requires as part of its construction at least 2 unrelated building trades or crafts. In other words, a B contractor shouldn't take a prime contract for any project involving trades other than framing or carpentry unless the prime contract requires at least 2 unrelated building trades other than framing or carpentry. There is no limitation on B contractors to stop them from taking on projects that only include framing or carpentry. The final class is C, or Specialty Contractors. These licenses are for construction work that requires special skills and whose principal contracting business involves the use of specialized building trades or crafts. Examples from this class include C10 electrical contractors, C20 HVAC contractors, C27 landscaping contractors, C36 plumbing contractors, C39 roofing contractors, C46 solar contractors, and C53 swimming pool contractors, just to name a few. There are also 30 limited specialty classes under the C61 classification. These include the C61/D34 prefabricated equipment class. More than 209,000 contractors hold a C license in California.
CSLB's newest licensing classification is called the B2 Residential Remodeling Classification. The B2 allows contractors who do not have structural framing experience to get a license with CSLB. Here's what interested applicants need to know. B2 license holders must engage in 3 or more trades or crafts on a project. B2 licensees also are limited to working on existing residential wood frame structures. There are some things B2 license holders cannot do. They cannot make structural alterations to load-bearing partitions and walls. They cannot install or extend electrical or plumbing systems. They can make modifications to existing systems, for example, install recessed lighting, or alter plumbing for 2 shower heads. B2 licensees also cannot install or replace an HVAC system. Like all other CSLB licensees, B2 applicants/licensees must comply with CSLB experience, examination, license bond, and workers' compensation insurance requirements. If you have more questions about the B2 license, email the licensing division at licensing@cslb.ca.gov.
When you are ready to apply for a license, here are the 2 forms you will need. On the left is the license application. On the right is the certification of work experience. You can get these forms on the CSLB website. There is a bonus link on the left side of the page, so be sure to download this presentation. We will give you a closer look at the different sections of these forms a little later.
Okay, now let's break down the steps of the application process. First, identify who will be the qualifier for your license. That person will be responsible for exercising direct supervision and control of the company. If you're an RME or responsible managing employee as your qualifier, determine if he or she can qualify for exam waiver. Be aware of companies you pay to connect you with a licensed qualifier. In some cases, these qualifiers are in a different part of the state and cannot exercise the direct supervision needed, or they aren't willing or don't understand their role as a qualifier. Next, make sure you complete the correct application. There are 2 options. 1, the application for original contractor's license, and 2, the application for original contractor's license, examination waiver 7065. We got links to both at the bottom of the page.
The next step is determine your company name. Take a look at the application for examples. Some things to keep in mind. Your name cannot be misleading or imply that you qualify for a license classification other than what you are getting. For example, if you're going to apply for a C36 plumbing license, you cannot have a company of John Smith Plumbing, Construction, Heating, and Drywall. Corporate and LLC names must match exactly the name registered with California Secretary of State's office. The names of everyone on your Secretary of State Statement of Information must be listed on your CSLB application. You can also use what is called a DBA, which stands for Doing Business As. The main thing to remember here is the DBA name cannot be misleading, and you must use that name in all advertising and on all your contracts. Next, you'll want to get together certifications to support your work experience. You should do this even if you apply for an exam waiver. Feel free to use multiple pages if necessary. Next, be sure to note if you are a military veteran. Some of your military service may be used to meet your 4 years of experience qualifications. Also, your application may be expedited through our Military Application Assistance Program. We mentioned that a few minutes ago. There is a bonus link at the bottom of the screen for more information on that program. To participate, you must have an honorable discharge. Be sure to include a copy of your military DD-214 paperwork showing your honorable discharge with your application. The next couple of items are basic but important. Proofread your application for any missing information. Make sure you have provided an answer to all necessary fields. Second, don't forget to sign and date the application. Finally, determine if you need a special accommodation to take your exams. If so, complete a request form and submit it with your application. We'll talk about the use of translators a little later.
Next, let's take a closer look at our fingerprint requirements, which are used for a criminal background check. This is a list of those who must submit a full set of fingerprints to CSLB depending on the type of business entity. All applicants, each corporate officer, each partner, each owner, the responsible managing employee, and all home improvement salespersons. If you are in California, you must submit fingerprints electronically with what's called live scan. You can get an updated list of live scan locations in California, broken down by county, on the Attorney General's website. We have a link here, so you can simply go to the Attorney General's website and search for live scan. You will also see we have a bonus link at the bottom of the screen to the fingerprint information page on our CSLB website. If you're out of state, it's going to be tough for you to get us your fingerprints. That's because you must submit hard copies of them the old-fashioned way. Those take anywhere between 3 and 6 months for the FBI and Department of Justice to process. So you might want to consider traveling to California to get your electronic live scan done here.
So what happens if you have any criminal convictions? CSLB may deny your license for the following reasons. First, if your conviction is substantially related to the duties, functions, and qualifications of a contractor. Also, if your conviction involves fraud or a violent crime. There are other factors CSLB also considers. They are the nature and severity of the crimes, the amount of time that has passed since a conviction, and any evidence of rehabilitation that you submit to CSLB. CSLB evaluates felony criminal convictions which occurred within 7 years of the application date. For misdemeanor criminal convictions, we would look back for 3 years of the application date. That's unless the convictions are for a violent felony, certain sexual crimes, or financial crimes related to construction. CSLB denies only 1% of the total applications we get based on criminal convictions. You'll also note the bonus link to our fingerprint information page.
Okay, along with the education credits we talked about earlier, this next section is probably the most important of the entire workshop and the part of the application that causes the most headaches for applicants. It is how you demonstrate your work experience on your application. Remember, the license qualifier needs 4 years or 48 months of experience within the past 10 years in the classification for which you're applying. The experience must be at no less than a journeyman level or as a foreman, supervising employee, contractor, or owner builder. A journeyman is defined as an experienced worker who is fully qualified as opposed to a trainee and can perform trade without supervision, or one who has completed an apprenticeship program.
There's a limited amount of space on the application to show your certified work experience, so feel free to use additional pages if needed, and simply attach them at the end of the work experience form. Use as many certifications of work experience form as you need to prove the required 4 years of experience within the last 10 years. Use a different form for each certifier. Be as accurate as possible. Make sure the person certifying your work describes the actual work you performed and the dates in which you performed them. We will now share some examples of both good and unacceptable descriptions to demonstrate work experience. Do not copy and paste this information directly into your applications. These are just examples.
At the top of this chart is the classification and type of experience you're trying to demonstrate. The first example is journey person experience. The overall theme we'll keep repeating is the more specific the description, the better. Note, the work experience form should be completed by your certifier, someone who has knowledge and has observed your work experience for the classification you're applying for. That person does not have to be a licensed contractor.
Our first example is for the Class B general building contractor. The best type of description your certifier would use for journey person experience is to be specific. Journey person experience must include hands-on work like this. Bob performed rough and finish carpentry, concrete forming and pours, rough out plumbing, and electrical, interior, exterior painting, and flooring on residential homes. An unacceptable description would be something generic like residential general building trades. For foreperson experience, the description must include some hands-on work and or supervisory work. Here's an example of the best type of description. Bob oversaw other staff at job sites performing rough and finish carpentry, concrete forming and pours, rough out plumbing and electrical, interior-exterior painting, and flooring on residential homes. Again, an unacceptable description would be something generic like residential general building trades. For supervising employee experience, the description should include an explanation of how you arrived at a supervisory level. An example is, as a construction lead on multiple projects, Bob supervised rough and finish carpentry, concrete forms and pours, rough out plumbing and electrical, interior-exterior painting, and flooring on residential homes. Again, unacceptable would be something like residential general building trades. For out-of-state experience, the description must include examples of work done that were out of state, military, on federal lands, or work for a government entity. Applicants can qualify as a journeyperson, foreperson, or supervising employee. A tip: be specific about your duties and employment circumstances.
Our next example is for the C27 landscaping contractor. First, for experience at the journeyman level. The best type of description your certifier would use would be: Jane performed landscape construction, maintenance, and installation of sprinklers, ground plants, low voltage lighting, ornamental yard art, concrete mow strips, and pathways, and tree pruning. An unacceptable explanation would be gardening, yard maintenance, and planting. For a C27 landscaping contractor, the best work experience description for a foreperson would be something like: Jane oversaw other staff at job site performing landscape construction, maintenance, and installation of sprinklers, ground plants, low voltage lighting, ornamental yard art, concrete mow strips and pathways, and tree pruning. An unacceptable description again would be something like gardening, yard maintenance, and planting. For a C27 supervising employee, the description should include an explanation of how you arrived at the supervisor level. The best description would be: as a construction lead on multiple projects, applicant supervised landscape construction, maintenance, and installation of sprinklers, ground plants, low voltage lighting, ornamental yard art, concrete mow strips and pathways, and tree pruning. Unacceptable here for the supervising employee would also be something like gardening, yard maintenance, and planting. Finally, for out-of-state contractors, the same guidance that we showed you for general building contractors is required. Be sure to include examples of your out-of-state work, as well as work for the military, on federal lands, or for a government entity. Be sure to be specific when you describe your duties and employment circumstances.
By law, CSLB must randomly review and verify all the information provided on at least 3% of our applications. Our next 3 slides run down the acceptable documentation you can use to support your work experience in the event your application was selected and you were asked to provide additional documentation. The supporting documentation should not be mailed in with your application. You will only need to provide this information if requested by CSLB staff. On the lower right of the screen, you'll see a link to this publication on our website, along with additional information on experience documentation. If you look at the chart, you can see the first column is for documents you can use if you were employed by a licensed contractor. The second column is for documenting your experience if you've been self-employed. The third column is for documentation you will need if you are applying for a Class B general building contractor license and need to use owner-builder experience to meet the experience requirements. Here's the next page of acceptable documentation. Again, you can click on the link to view and print this publication. If you do not have this information readily available, you may want to begin to gather it now, just in case you're asked to provide it in the future. Remember, you're trying to demonstrate 4 years of experience within the last 10 years. CSLB staff may contact the certifier of experience or other parties to verify experience.
One other note, CSLB gets more than 1,000 applications each month, so our application processing staff has seen it all. They've got 2 pieces of advice. First, don't cut and paste from this presentation. Also, don't try to get around having to take a trade test by applying for multiple subcategories under the C61 limited specialty classification. Okay, that is the content you'll need to fill out your application. Before getting it to CSLB, double check to make sure you did not miss anything. Be sure to sign and date it as well. And don't forget to include the all-important $450 application fee. You'll pay the initial license fee of $200 for a sole owner license or $350 for a non-sole owner license after you pass your exam or exams. Then put your application packet in the mail to CSLB or hand deliver to one of our public counters. We've got a bonus link at the bottom of the screen with our office locations.
We'll now go over the parts of the application. Section 1, the business name and address. Now that we have gone through the information you'll need to include, here's a closer look at the application so you can see where the information goes. Section 1 is where you'll list your business name. Remember, when selecting a business name, make sure that the name that you have selected is compatible with the classification and the entity that you're applying for and is not misleading. If your business is a corporation or LLC, you will need to make sure that the name you provided in this section matches exactly the business name registered with the Secretary of State. In line 2, you will indicate what classification you're applying for. The mailing address and phone number that you list on line 3A and 3C will be made public on CSLB's website once you're licensed. Section 2, the business entity. In Section 2, you will select your business entity. If you're applying for a corporation or LLC, you will need to provide your registration number provided to you by the Secretary of State. Make sure to pay extra attention to the instructions in this section pertaining to the entity for which you are applying.
Section 3, qualifying individual, full legal name and address. In Section 3, you will list the qualifier's information. Remember, the qualifier is the person that meets the experience requirements and will be responsible for the direct supervision and control of construction operations. The qualifier will be the person taking the exams. On line 6, you will list any previous or current license numbers you've held. You will also need to list the percentage of the new business owned by the qualifier. For example, if you were the only person that would be listed on the license, you would enter 100%. On line 7, you will need to indicate the position that will be held by the qualifier. Each entity has different personnel requirements. You will need to make sure that you have listed all positions depending on the entity you have selected. You can find more information on this on pages 2 through 4 of the application instructions. Line 8 is where you will sign and date your application. Section 4, personnel full legal names and addresses. Section 4 is where you will list the personnel information for all remaining personnel that will be listed on the license. For example, if you are applying for a corporation, you will need to indicate who will be the responsible managing officer or employee, president, secretary, and treasurer. Again, more information can be found on page 4 of the application instructions. If you have more than 4 people on your license, you can make additional copies of this page and include it with your application. For corporations and LLCs, you will want to make sure that all personnel that are listed with the Secretary of State are listed in this section. All personnel that will be listed on the license must sign the application in Section 4.
Section 5 is a series of yes and no questions, so we're not going to cover those here. Section 6, qualifier education, apprenticeship, licensure, and military. You may be granted credit towards your 4-year experience requirement based on your education. Question 17 asks if you have completed an educational or apprenticeship program. You will need to submit official sealed transcripts if you would like to be considered for this credit. If you attended formal training or an apprenticeship program, you will need to provide a certificate of completion. Get those sealed transcripts mailed to you and then include the sealed transcripts with your application packet. Do not have the program send transcripts directly to CSLB. You don't want to take the chance that we're not able to match them up with your application. CSLB may grant you up to 3 years of credit based on your education. This credit is not on a year-to-year basis, meaning if you have a 2-year college degree, you won't necessarily be granted 2 years of credit towards the experience requirement. You may qualify for this credit regardless of when you completed your education. The 10-year time frame does not apply to education. You may also apply for this credit even if your education was received out of the country. If your degree is in another language other than English, it must be translated and evaluated by an accredited evaluation service that does business within the United States. Now we'll move on to the certification of work experience. Part 1. Now we will discuss the certification of work experience. Part 1 will be filled out by you, the applicant. Here you will list the information about your employer where you gained your experience. If you are self-employed when you gain the experience, please make sure to check the box in line 2. If you are applying for a B general construction license and will be using experience obtained while working on your own property, make sure to mark the box in line 4 and complete an owner-builder construction project experience form that we will discuss later. Part 2 will be filled out by your certifier. In this section, the certifier must include the dates in which you obtained the experience. They must also select if you are working on a part-time or full-time basis. Keep in mind, if you are working part-time, you will receive 50% credit for that time, which means you will need to provide 8 years of experience within the last 10 years to meet the 4-year requirement. On line 6, your certifier will need to list the duties you performed or supervised that are considered critical for the classification you're applying for. You can read a description of critical duties in CSLB's Description of Classifications booklet available on our website. Do not copy and paste the description from the booklet. This is only to give you an idea of what CSLB considers critical duties for each classification. Your certifier should complete this section in their own words and be as complete and accurate as possible. The final part of the work experience certification is also to be completed by your certifier. They need to list their relationship to you and provide their contact information. Lastly, they will need to sign and date the certification.
Owner Builder B General Building Construction Project Experience, Part 1 of 3. The next form we will discuss is the Owner Builder B General Building Construction Project Experience form. This form only needs to be completed if you are applying for the B General Construction License and you want to receive experience credit for working on projects on your own property. A separate form is required for each project on the property. The experience must be verifiable through building permits, final inspections, and other documentation. You will need to list the building permit number on line 6. On line 7, you will need to provide the scope of the project. Part 2 of 3, in boxes 8 through 10, you will need to provide more detailed information about the project. Part 3 of 3, question 11 asks if other general construction contractors worked on the project and what trades they performed. Remember, this information should be as complete and accurate as possible. With all the information we just covered, this is a good time to remind you that we are recording this workshop. We'll post the video to our YouTube channel so that you can go back and rewatch it in case there's anything you missed. Okay, so we've got your application submitted. How do you check the status of that application? Here are two resources. First is the Secure Checked. You'll need your application fee number and contractor PIN number to get an update. We'll send you that information after we receive, cashier, and key into the system your completed application. The second way to check is to look online at our processing times. Each week, we update our website with the date we receive the paperwork for a specific process. So look for the date being worked on and know that if the date shown is after the date we likely received your paperwork, it's likely we're busy working on your application. As you can imagine, CSLB receives hundreds, if not thousands of documents every day, and we process them in the order that they have been received. So be sure to take the extra time getting the application right so we don't have to send it back to you to correct and then have to start processing your application again. When your application has been posted, CSLB will send you a notice to appear for examination and a study guide. You should get your exam notice at least 3 weeks prior to your exam date. CSLB has many authorized test centers throughout California and encourages candidates to take their exams at the nearest test center.
If you are an applicant whose first language isn't English and you don't feel confident taking your exams in English, we do allow you to use a translator. The translator, who you provide, simply reads you the exam questions. Question 16 on the application asks if you need to use a translator to complete the examination. The translator must be approved by CSLB in advance. You cannot just show up on the day of your examination to the test center with someone to translate the exam for you. When you get an exam date, make sure you do not miss it. If you fail to appear for your exam, you will have to pay a non-refundable $100 fee to reschedule. That fee may be waived once with documented evidence of a medical emergency or other circumstance beyond your control. Also, we have study guides available for each of our exams. Included in each study guide, you will find a list of sections and topics covered by the exam. They also include sample questions, how each section of the exam is weighted, and recommended resources that you can use to prepare for the examination. These study guides are available online on our website. There's a bonus link to them on the bottom of the screen.
Here's a quick look at two of those study exams. The first is the Law and Business exam, which all qualifiers must take, no matter which license classification, including the D-Series limited classes. You can see the guide contains a breakdown of examination topics, some test strategies, sample questions, and resources that were used to help create that exam. You will see the same format on the B General Study Guide. We would recommend that you really pay attention to the exam content here, especially how we have it broken down, what percentage of questions there will be on each of the 5 topics on the exam. On the lower right of both of these 2 slides, you will see bonus links to the actual study guide, as well as a link to the complete list of study guides.
We do have COVID-19 procedures in place for applicants on test day. These procedures could change, so check the CSLB website before your test date. Plan to arrive at least 15 minutes early for your exam. Give yourself extra time to get checked in. Applicants are recommended to wear a face mask or other face covering. Check and follow your local COVID-19 mask guidance before arriving for your test. If you appear ill, you will have to reschedule your exam for at least 5 days later at no additional charge. And you will not be admitted into the test center more than 15 minutes prior to your exam time. We've also produced a short What to Expect on Test Day video that you can watch on our YouTube channel. The link is at the bottom of your screen.
You'll take your exam on a touchscreen computer. Before starting, you'll see an on-screen tutorial that will take you through the process. The exam itself consists of multiple choice questions. You'll also see a space on each question where you can, if you want, submit a comment about that question. You'll get 3.5 hours to complete each exam. Don't arrive late, or that may reduce the amount of time that you get to complete your exam. You'll get your results at the end of the exam. If you do not pass the exam, you will not be allowed to review the questions you missed, but you will get a statement showing how you did on each section of the exam. You can reschedule the exam as many times as you need to within the 18-month period, as long as you pay the non-refundable $100 rescheduling fee each time.
After you pass your exam, what happens next? First, you'll need to pay your initial license fee, $200 for a sole owner license and $350 for a non-sole owner license that will be good for 2 years. You'll also need to complete an online asbestos open book exam. Plus, you'll need to file your required $15,000 contractor's surety bond and possibly some other bonds depending on what type of business entity you'll have. And you'll need to get your required insurance policy. If you've got employees, you'll need to get workers' compensation insurance. If you're going to be an LLC, you'll also need liability insurance. See our website for more information. Please note that your insurance company or broker can submit your insurance information to CSLB directly on our website. If you don't have employees, you must file a workers' compensation exemption with CSLB. You can do that online as well.
In about 5 to 10 business days, CSLB will send you a wall certificate and plastic pocket license card. Display the wall certificate in your main office or chief place of business. Carry your pocket card with you, especially in situations where you're going to solicit business, talk to potential customers, or sign contracts. We encourage consumers to ask to see your pocket license. If you're going to have salespeople working for you, be sure to get them registered as a home improvement salesperson with CSLB. Check our website for more on how to do that. Your license will be good for 2 years. It'll expire on the last day of the month when it was issued. Be sure to put that expiration date on your calendar, in your phone, anywhere you need so you won't forget it. CSLB will send you a renewal notice in the mail approximately 60 days before it expires, but ultimately it is your responsibility to renew your license on time.
Here are a couple other important deadlines to keep in mind. First, notify CSLB within 30 days if you move or change your business address. Your renewal notice will be sent to the address of record that we've got on file. If you're not at that address anymore, you're probably not going to get it. Plus, the Postal Service will not forward state government mail. Finally, notify CSLB within 30 days of all changes to personnel on your license, especially when it involves the qualifier of the license.
Once you get your license and get to work, you might want to hire someone as a salesperson to solicit, sell, and negotiate home improvement contracts on your behalf outside of your place of business. These people are called Home Improvement Salesperson, or HIS. Without an HIS, the official personnel of record on a license are the only ones who can sell, solicit, negotiate, or execute a contract. That includes individual contractors, licensed qualifiers, partners, corporate officers, and LLC responsible managing officers, members, managers, or employees. An HIS can work for more than one contractor. The licensee must inform CSLB in writing when they either associate or disassociate an HIS with their license.
There are a couple of exceptions to note. First are those who only schedule appointments for the contractor or registered HIS, and bona fide service and repair people. These are the folks you call out for repairs, including for things like air conditioning, heating, and plumbing. But those service and repair people are limited to the work that was initially requested by the buyer or homeowner. For example, if your AC goes out and you call an HVAC company to come out, the service person does not have to be a registered salesperson. But if they go beyond the repair itself and sell you a new HVAC system, they would have to be a registered HIS. Also, don't employ an unregistered salesperson. That subjects you to administrative discipline, and the salesperson might get a citation or possibly even a criminal misdemeanor. We've got bonus links at the bottom of the page if you want to look at the actual code sections of law.
Good morning. Okay, that is our presentation. Now it is time to answer your questions. So let me see here. I have a BA in comparative literature from UC Davis with a minor in Spanish. Originally, I went to Davis as an engineering student, so I took engineering level calculus classes. Would my degree count for credit? Now it could. However, we would need you to send that in with your application, and we would make a determination based on the classification that you're applying for and looking at the official transcript from your school. In the presentation that you just saw, you got to see a small outline of the credit that you possibly could get from different degrees. So you have a general idea of what could happen. However, again, we would need to see the application with the original transcripts. And as a reminder, we do need the official original transcripts. So the next from the same person, David McLean. I have worked in trades for many years. I have helped on many building projects, but I was only an employee of a contractor for 1 year. All the other 20 years of experience I have were working on a time and materials basis, and the owner was pulling permits. I am a musician, so I wasn't able to take on full-time work under a contractor. How can I adequately prove my work experience apart from the 1 year as an employee? So if you were working, let's see, you were working on a time and material basis and the owner was pulling the permit. So you were working for someone, an owner builder or an owner of a home. Anybody can certify you. They have to have the firsthand knowledge of your experience. It doesn't have to be an employer who does it. If you look at the options on the certification of work experience, there's several different options. It can be a business associate. It could be a contractor. It can be a fellow employee. You know, there's different options that you have. So as far as a certification, anybody can do that. The owner can state what you did for them. If it was going for the B classification, which I see your next comment is going for a general B classification, potentially a B2. The B would require project lists and finalized permits and inspection reports. So if that owner who pulled those permits had that information, then we would want to see that. And it would show that this person pulled it, but you can say that you worked for him and that person would also be your certifier. Now, I'm not saying that would automatically get you that classification. However, that's what we would require. And then you would want to do at least that 1 year as the employee. We can't go back 20 years. It does have to be within 10 years of the receipt of your application when we receive it, is as far back as we can go with your experience. But if you also turn in your official transcripts, that can be taken into consideration. For a B2, because you mentioned going for a general B classification, potentially a B2. A B2, you have to have 3 unrelated trades. There is going to be no framing, as would be your main component of the B classification. So as the B2, you would have 3 unrelated trades. It could be, as an example, painting, drywall, maybe plumbing fixtures. And that doesn't necessarily have to, you wouldn't show permits for that or inspection reports, but it would have to still be certified a minimum of 4 years within the last 10 years on a work cert. Next question. Would my current sole ownership DBA of NorCal Realty be an acceptable DBA, or will I need to create a new DBA? Well, I don't have all the information. So what classification do you hold? You can't have more than one business name on a sole ownership. So you could either, if you have your personal name with the DBA NorCal Realty, that would be acceptable. If you didn't, then you couldn't have like Joe's construction DBA NorCal Realty. As a sole owner, you cannot have more than one business name. And unfortunately, those two coincide and they are 2 business names. When it has your personal name, that's not considered a business name. But I would need more information on that. So if you wanted to provide more information, you could send an email to licensing. It's licensing at cslb.ca.gov. And then one of us would be able to give you a more in detail answer to your question. Beyond school, can I receive all my remaining 4 years of credit from working for an architect? So an architect is not a licensee. And dependent upon the classification that you're applying for, you might need to have, again, as before when we talked about the B classification, you might need to have project list with finalized permits and inspection reports. If you don't have those, and that does pertain to a couple different classes. So it's dependent upon your class, and it's dependent upon what the circumstances for. That's kind of a vague question, because the architect is not licensed through CSLB. So it's not going to be something that we're going to have, information. We can't pull them up and say, okay, he's a B class. So we would need a little bit more information, and it might be a little bit more in detail of what you might need to show. Again, does the architect I work for need to fill out a different form than the certification of work experience, or is that the correct form? That is always the correct form for any applicant who is showing us their work experience. There is no other form. I wanted to verify online. It says I can receive credit from working for a former licensed contractor. To clarify, he had a contractor's license that expired before I worked for him. He now works as a designer, and I work for him as a drafter. Okay, so if the license is expired, we do look at that, and we would not grant credit. How would he be able to, how would you be able to work for him in the classification that you're applying for when he doesn't have a valid license? So that's something that we would look at. If you're just drawing plans, if that's what it means to be a drafter, and he now just works as a designer, again, that's not something that we license. We would have to see that there was hands-on experience or supervision of other employees, but again, it would have to be for a valid license. So that's a little, if you wanted to provide more information, you could also send an email to the licensing email, which is licensing@cslb.ca.gov. Who do I contact regarding booking accommodations for learning disabilities? I have ADHD that I have legal documentation for and would like accommodations for the exam. So when you send in your application, you are more than welcome to send in a reasonable accommodation documentation with that, and they will set that up for you so that if you need additional time or whatever the special circumstances, they would be able to work with you on that. Is there volume? I can't hear anything at all. Participants have their microphones off. So my microphone is on. I haven't been told anything differently. You might want to check yours and make sure that we're not muted. Juanita, but if you have a question and you still can't hear for some reason, you can send an email to the licensing@cslb.ca.gov. Renee, I'm still a bit confused. So I need a combination of 4 years experience or have someone that has that experience sign for me. Also, I thought I saw something saying I could be exempt if I take a test in place of experience. So no, you have to have the experience before we'll allow you to sit for the testing. So every applicant sends in their application. They have the certification of work experience. Each applicant has to show 4 years minimum of journey level experience doing the trade that they've applied for. Once we are satisfied with what we've seen, and that could be making an additional phone call to your certifier, then we will schedule you to go on to testing. But you can't just take a test. We have to see your experience before we allow you to take that test. I have experience as a business consultant for 7-Eleven Corporation. Does that qualify experience? Consultation, no. We want hands-on experience or supervision of employees of a licensed contractor that you supervise doing the trade. Again, journey level at a minimum for every applicant. Did a business training program through them, which I received a business management certificate. Unfortunately, we don't look at certificates, let's say through training programs like this. What we are allowed to give education credit for would be your official transcripts from a university, an apprenticeship from a union. But as far as certificates go, we would not be able to grant experience for that. What type of projects can a B2 contractor perform? So they cannot do any kind of framing. They cannot install HVAC, electrical or plumbing. They can do. If you look at the slide that's showing up here, you can make repairs or do like fixtures or whatnot on the electrical, the plumbing, and the HVAC. But you can't do installs or replacements. Again, no framing. And with the B classification, we want to see that you have framing, rough framing, structural framing. You can't do any of those with the B2. Cindy just said salesperson, and I'm not certain what you mean. If you want to apply for a home improvement salesperson, we do have an application on our website. What that allows you to do is to go into someone's home once you are registered and affiliated with a licensed contractor and sign contracts with them or change contracts with them. But you do have to be licensed excuse me, not licensed, registered through the board and then associated with a contractor first. Can we have two businesses in one license? I don't quite know what you're saying, Clara. If you want to go ahead and send us an email at the licensing at cslb.ca.gov with a little bit more information, we can try to get you a better answer. Cindy, does a salesperson have to be licensed with CSLB? If so, is there a fee? So they have to be registered with CSLB, and then once registered, they have to be affiliated with a licensed contractor. There is a fee for that application. I believe it is 200. Give me just a second. Of course, I don't have it on my desktop. There is a fee. It is included on the application. When you pull up the application on our website, it'll state at the top of what it is, and it does have to be renewed every 2 years. But again, you have to be registered with CSLB first, and then your registration needs to be affiliated with a licensed contractor before you can legally be a salesperson and go out and change or make new orders for a contractor. Who can get an exam waiver? So it's a little bit of a loaded question. If you've already tested in the classification that you're applying for, and it's been within 5 years, you can get an examination waiver as long as you're applying for the same classification. If you have been listed on a license as an officer, member, manager, general partner, it's a possibility that you can have a listed on license exam waiver. Same classification listed on the license is what you'd have to be applying for. There are certain circumstances and criteria that have to be met. So that's why I say could. It's not always a guarantee. So those are a few of the waivers that you could possibly apply for. Tariq, if I am applying for a B license and I worked for a person prior to him becoming a general contractor B licensed, do those years count? What evidence can I provide to prove that? So it sounds like you're saying that you worked for him before he was licensed. So, and that's my assumption. For B, we do look to see if you had a licensed employer. We do look to see if they were current. If in doubt, we will ask for project list. We could ask for finalized permits and inspection reports. So those are some of the things that we would ask for if we see that somebody is not licensed. Let's say you worked for somebody in Nevada and they had a B similar license. We could go look at Nevada's state board and pull that up and see that they were licensed, they were current and good standing, and contracted in the times that you stated that you were employed by them, and in that case, we wouldn't ask you for additional information. But as far as your employer not being a general B or not licensed prior when you worked for him, you would probably have additional information asked of you, and it would be on you to provide that once we did ask for that. If you couldn't, then we probably would not be able to grant that classification or suggest that you apply for something that you would be able to meet the criteria for. I have been working for a contractor for the past 6 years as a plumber. Is it best to apply for a Class B or a Class C license? So if you worked for a plumber, chances are you're not going to have the experience for a B. And if you worked for 6 years for that plumber, I mean, I would, the course of action that I would take, I would be applying for my C36 plumbing classification license. That would make sense to me. I can't apply for something that I don't have experience in. But that is completely up to you. When we receive applications, what we initially do is we review them. If there's something wrong with them or if it needs correcting, we do return them for correction. And it's not a denial. It's a return, so you can correct it, and we can go back and forth like that. You do have 90 days from the first date that I look at it and return it for correction to get me back your corrections for me to post you and to refer you to exams. If I can't do that, it's a possibility that your application will void. And as seen on the applications, once they are submitted with the fees, they are non-refundable. So you do want to make sure that you have your information, your I's dotted, your T's crossed, sent in. Those my experience qualify me for a Class B. Tanya, I don't think so. Just based off the information you gave us that you worked for 6 years as a plumber, I would not say that would qualify you for a B class. If you want to send us an email asking for additional information, we cannot pre-qualify you or anyone else, but maybe we can give you a little bit more information. You can send an email to licensing@cslb.ca.gov. Heidi, I have worked as a landscaper gardener since 2005, full-time for about 7 different employers. Do I need to go locate all these people and get them to fill out the scope of work descriptions for the certificate of work experience? So the board only requires 4 years minimum. So if you said you've done it since 2005, we can only accept work experience back 10 years from the date that we receive your application. So you wouldn't need to go back. Let's say we received your application today. You could not go back any further than November 4th of 2012. If that did have 3 different employers, you could go to the employer if that's what you wanted to do, or as I stated earlier, your certifier does not have to be the employer. It can be a fellow employee. It can be a business associate. There's a couple different titles that are listed on the certification and work experience form. To be a certifier, they have to have firsthand knowledge of your experience. And when we say firsthand knowledge, we don't mean, hey, he told me or she told me, this is what they did. That's not the firsthand knowledge. Firsthand knowledge is we saw it. We were on the job site. We worked side by side with you. I was a subcontractor for so-and-so who was there. So it doesn't have to be the employers. It can be somebody, again, who has firsthand knowledge of that experience. I'm applying for an additional license, a B2 on my current license, a C7. I'm a sole owner with no employee. Do I still need to provide fingerprints? Depending upon when you were licensed, you may have to. If you haven't fingerprinted, I believe since 2004, then you will have to. If it's been more recent than that, chances are you did do it with us, and they would carry over. Clara says, sorry is corporation. I don't know what that means. Brian, I'm still a little unclear on the exam waiver. I have a 4-year BS degree and 16 years of doing a mixture of owner builder and working as a journeyman for a few contractors. I don't mind taking a test. Would this help speed the process or help guarantee I obtain a license? Dependent upon what your degree is, you could receive some education credit. So if you're going to send in an application, we would have to have the official transcripts from your school. As far as 16 years of doing a mixture of owner builder and working as a journeyman, It's also dependent upon the classification that you're applying for. You would not receive a waiver just because you have a degree and you have journey level experience. Again, some of the criteria for an examination waiver would be that you've already tested with CSLB for the same classification you're applying for, and it would have to be within the last 5 years. Or you could be listed on a license as an officer, a general partner, a member or manager for a minimum of 5 of the last 7 years in good standing. So not a lot of people meet that criteria. And it sounds like you would need to submit your degree with some experience so that we could take a look at it. Again, the waiver isn't because you have a degree. A degree can definitely get you some education credit, but it will not get you a waiver. Heidi, clarification. May I go back as far as 2005 and 2007 to certify all my experience? We won't count it. Unfortunately, we can only go back 10 years by state law. Am I restricted to just the most recent 2 or 3 employers? You're restricted to the last 10 years from the date of the receipt of your application. We can't look at the 2005, 2007 because that is out of the 10-year experience gap. So your most recent within the last 10 years is what we want to look at. We have a corporation license, a C33. Can we have epoxy coating with the same trade C33? Claire, why don't you go ahead and send us an email at licensing@cslb.ca.gov so we can talk about that, and you can give us your license number so we can look at that. Okay. Charles, I have been taking care of rentals for my family for over 20 years on nights, weekends, and some vacation days, doing repair work, construction projects, and managing subs. However, I am not an employee and typically don't get compensated. Can I count this time? Unfortunately, if it was on a voluntary basis, um, I'm going to say no. In addition, you cannot supervise, manage, oversee subcontractors. They are licensed contractors and do not require supervision. So applicants do not get credit when they state that they are supervising, overlooking, or managing subcontractors. Again, they are licensed, they don't require supervision, and you will not receive credit for that. Voluntary basis, doing simple things for your family is not going to be journey level. And this would be considered part-time since it's some nights, weekends, vacation days, doing repair work. It's not concrete. Depending upon the classification that you would apply for, it might be able to get by on some different classifications. It definitely would not work for the B class. We would have to have full-time journeyman level with compensation to count. Again, it's a little bit more in depth than some of the other classifications. So it would need a little bit more information. Dan, I worked for a flooring company for 8 years full time, but for the last 2 years, I worked as a machinist. My certifier also does not work for the company currently. Besides filling out the application form, what proof do I need to gather to prove my work experience? W-2s, pay stubs. So if you're applying for the C15 flooring, based on what you're stating in this question, again, it doesn't have to be your employer who certifies your work experience. They don't have to currently work for the employer. It has to be somebody who has firsthand knowledge of your experience. They've witnessed that you can do these trades. We will not ask for W-2s or pay stubs. We cannot by law at our level. Let's say, as was seen in the slides, there is a 3% that gets pulled for investigation. Now, if you were pulled by enforcement for investigation on that random 3%, they could ask you for those to prove that you were working for this flooring company. But at the level of a processing technician, we cannot. So my best advice would be that if you work for a flooring company, have somebody with a firsthand knowledge, fill out your form, you have your trades listed, and you can go from there. If you did it for 8 years and it was within the last 10 years, or at least 4 of those years were in the last 10 years, you could be fined to go through with your application. Cindy, if I were a handyman now going into window, doors, and screen installation, does my experience as a handyman provide me with credit? So being a handyman doesn't give you anything more than anything else that you've done. Going around your home, fixing baseboards, replacing a garage door or a window, or fixing some plumbing fixtures. You don't get any credit for being a handyman. You don't state that you have a city license or a county license, which also wouldn't give you credit. But I'm not quite sure what kind of credit you're looking for. Based on what you say, well, Windows is a C17. That would require testing, but you mentioned doors and screen installations. So I'm not certain what classification you're looking at. You would need probably to provide a little bit more information on what you were looking at and how you developed your experience that you're going to claim for the trade that you're going to apply for. Michael, I have a current license that will that number be assigned to my new classification if approved? If you're adding a classification to your existing license, your license number does not change. Again, you would have to be adding it to your existing license, and that number does not change. If you apply for a brand new license, there are chances that you can either take over your old license number or you can be reassigned a new number. But again, if it's applying for a new classification to your current license, then same number applies. I have a C7 locksmith PPO alarm license. I would like a D16 and D28. How do I do it? So a C7 is low voltage. I'm not sure if you're saying you have locksmith also besides the C7, but if you wanted to add the D16 and the D28, you would have to do an add class application. One at a time. You can only apply for one classification at a time. You still have to show 4 years full-time experience, journey level with a certifier per classification. Charles, I recently had my home built by a contractor and the permit was pulled by him. I did some of the work on the project to keep costs down. It included grading, fences, subfloor, underlayment, flooring, constructing out buildings. How can I count? Can I count that as owner builder? So owner builder, you would pull your permit. You could still have a contractor on the premises. However, you won't receive credit for what the contractor actually did. So if he pulled the permit and it states that he did those things, the grading, fencing, flooring, and constructing out buildings, you could not receive credit for that. Yeah, as the owner builder, you would pull the permit and then you could hire other people to do it. But if he pulled the permit and it shows this was the scope of work, because he pulled the permit, it shows from the city or the county where he pulled the permit that he actually did that work. They don't itemize the permits to say that Joe did this, Charles did that, and Tom did this. It's under his name and it states um, the reason for getting this or for getting the permit. So it's going to show that he did it. So if any of those trades were listed, you would not get credit for that. Arturo, my corporation is Westworld Security Services, Inc., if this helps with my question. I don't remember what your question was, Arturo. A second, let me see if I can pull that up. Okay, so you just have the C7 classification. So yes, if you want to add the D16 and there was another D, again, 4 years full-time experience, journey level per classification, one at a time, using the additional classification application, which is located on our website. Dan, just to clarify, he was not licensed. He was a supervisor. I gained enough experience to run my own crew. Dan, I don't remember what your, unfortunately, there's a lot of messages in there. So if you want to send an email, Dan, to licensing@cslb.ca.gov and give us that information again, we can look into that. Juan, my RMO will be disassociating from my company after 2 months of being licensed. If I start the process to take the test and get licensed myself, can I use the same company name? I do have my experience 4+ years. So Juan, if you already have a license established, but after 2 months of being licensed, so I'm thinking you haven't been licensed very long. If I start the process, your company name doesn't change on your license. Your experience, though, if you weren't licensed for the 4 years prior to the time that you're going to claim, you can't use that name with your license number, because we will look it up. We will see that if I'm correct, that it's only been licensed for the last 2 months. You can't state that you worked there for 4 years. Full-time journey level in order to take that over. If you have experience elsewhere for that same classification that your RMO holds, who is disassociating from your company, then you would be replacing the qualifier. You would use that application and you would submit your experience within the last 10 years from wherever you did receive it. Brian, please disregard my previous question. You answered my questions with someone else's questions. Thank you. Cindy, I have a few messages in there. Okay. Charles, I have been running a handyman business for the last 2 years, 1 year as a sole proprietor, and now the last year as an LLC. 2 questions. 1, can this experience count towards the qualification? 2, I want my LLC to eventually be able to do large projects. So would I apply as an LLC rather than under my name? It's completely up to you what entity that you want to apply for. I can tell you that as an LLC, if you apply for that before licensing, your issuance requirements are more than it would be if you were a sole proprietorship. You have to have an additional bond. You have to have liability in addition to workers' comp. So there is extra insurance requirements required of LLCs that have to be submitted for licensure and kept up with over the years. It's a possibility that your experience could count towards the classification, but again, if you're applying for a B2, which is our handyman classification, which is pretty new, we have to see that you have that experience. Again, that is 3 unrelated trades. That does not include any sort of framing, rough, structural, or regular. It doesn't include installation or repair of HVAC, plumbing, or electrical. If you're applying for our handyman B2. The others you would have to have, if you were applying for, let's say, a B, handyman would probably not get you the qualification that you need for the B classification. But again, it is based on the class that you're going to be applying for. Because the B, if you're stating that you're self-employed, we would need to see project list again, finalize permits, and inspection reports. David, can a B2 contractor repair fences or install replacement windows? So they can, but again, a B2 has to have 3 unrelated trades. So repairing fences and replacing windows. However, there needs to be another trade. You cannot just take on 2 of the unrelated 3 trades. That was David Gutierrez. David McLean, does working as a construction manager for a construction company count towards getting experience for a general B license? So if you're with you as a construction manager, if you are considered journeyman level, if you're considered a foreman, which could possibly be equivalent to a manager, it very well could be. It's dependent upon who you worked for how long did you work for them, and how long were you in that position. Again, 4 years full-time experience within the last 10 years to apply for the B classification. Tariq, if I'm applying for a B license and I worked for a person when he had an S Corp, lumped sum not under his payroll, prior to him becoming a general contractor B licensed, do those years count? What evidence can I provide to prove that? So did he 1099 you? If he 1099 you, that we still consider that employment. You could list him as your employer with his license number, with a certifier, again, who has firsthand knowledge of your experience. So that's a possibility. Again, we can't ask you for W-2s or payroll recs. But based on what you're saying, you could have been 1099, which would still consider you an employee under him. If it was under the table and you did not receive a 1099 as a license B applicant, you would most likely need to show us the additional information that we ask for, which would be project list, permits, finalized permits, and inspection reports. It doesn't matter if he was a sole ownership or an S Corp, a corporation, we don't look at that. Dan, I would also be applying for the flooring license. So the C15, Dan, 4 years full-time experience with somebody who has the firsthand experience being your certifier. You don't have to have permits to do the C15, but we do want to see your specific trades listed on your certification of work experience by your certifier, showing us or telling us, that you have this experience. Again, all of it would be reviewed. These are never just final answers. And upon review, your processing technician would make the decision whether or not we're going to pass you through to testing or ask for additional information. Renee, if I submit my application and my work experience does not meet minimum time requirement, then am I able to dig further and resubmit more experience? You are, but again, within the last 10 years, we can't go any further than that, and that is state law. If you were to submit, let's say, 2018 November to November right now, that's 4 years, and we say, okay, wait a minute, this doesn't add up or doesn't look good, you can only go back to 2012. Again, 10 years from the date of the receipt of your application is as much information as we can consider for your work experience. Renee also, I have my own handyman business and want to progress to bigger projects. What is my best course of action to obtain my Class B license? Honestly, if you haven't worked for a License B contractor, I think that would be the best route to go. To have that tutelage and to work under someone to gain that journey level knowledge. I honestly believe that's anybody's best course of action would be to work for the classification that you want to specialize in, that you want to go further with in your life, especially if you don't have education to offset some of that experience, that 4 years full-time journey level experience. I would recommend trying to work for someone who holds a classification that you want to further your career in down the line. Renee, again, after obtaining a license to renew, do we need to retest, or is it just a fee to renew, keep the license current? So we don't offer, or we don't do continuing education for our licensees. You would have to renew your license every 2 years if you have been active, every 4 years if you have been inactive. If you let it expire, you do have 5 years from that expiration date to re-up it or renew it before you have to reapply and retest at that time. But again, that's if you've let your license lapse over 5 years, then you'd have to reapply and you would be required to retest. Tariq, if I have a BS in electrical engineering and a master in systems engineering and project management and 2 years of trade experiences, framing, painting, electrical, and supervising, working under a general contractor B, is that enough to qualify? It could be, but again, we would have to see your official transcripts with your experience in your application. They gave you a generalization of what you possibly could earn from your degree in the slideshow prior to me coming on. So you should have a general idea of what you could be granted, but I can't say for sure what you would be granted until we saw your application. Cindy Pridgeon, apply for a D52 and a D58. So I think you were the doors and screens, one classification at a time, 4 years full-time journey level experience per classification. Again, doesn't have to be the employer, but would have to be somebody, your certifier would have to be somebody who has firsthand knowledge of your experience. Arturo, Dana, thank you. To clarify, I've been a C7, 2 years locksmith license, 4 years PPO license, 6 years alarm a month. Can I use this as my experience? So those other licenses aren't with CSLB. So I believe, not sure where locksmith and alarms go, if it's BSIS. You could possibly use it. Again, we'd have to see if you have a 2 years locksmith, what did you do to gain that experience in order to get the license with that state agency? That's something that we would need to look at. Did they require, what experience did they require? Did you have to work for someone? Did you have to test? Same thing with the alarm. You're more than welcome to use it. However, it might not be enough. I can't give you a concrete answer on that. If you want to, send me an email at licensing@cslb.ca.gov. We can discuss it a little bit more in detail. Tariq, If I have over 6 years of experience under big engineering company, mixed of journeyman and supervision of 3 trades, low voltage, high voltage, and solar system development, can this qualify me for a B license? No, it cannot. The main component of the B general building classification is framing, rough framing or structural framing, with 2 unrelated trades. So you do have to have a structural framing in there somewhere. As an engineering company, I don't know if they just have an A if they're licensed or if they have other classifications, because there are some classifications where they can use the engineering wording. So if you want to send me a little bit more information, again, at the email licensing@cslb.ca.gov. I can look into it for you. It's dependent on a couple different things. But if you do not have framing experience, that would not qualify you for a B license. Could you clarify what trade duties a B2 license applicant must perform to qualify? Again, as per the slides in the workshop prior to me coming on to answer the questions, a B2 classification requires 3 unrelated trades. There is no framing whatsoever, no install or repair of HVAC, electrical, or plumbing. So, as an example, you could do painting, you could do drywall, and you could do landscaping, let's say. Those would be 3 unrelated trades that could qualify you for the B2 classification. In addition, there are some things that Bs can't perform, like you can't do C57, which is well drilling, and you can't do the C16 fire. So those are also prohibited from the B2 classification. Arturo, I do this already, wiring and install equipment, D28, card activated equipment and other access control device and any low voltage electronic and contractor installs. Okay. So if you do that already, and you have somebody who can clarify this on your certification of work experience form, I would say to go ahead and apply for that D28 classification. So you're a little bit of a different scenario since you already hold a license with CSLB, which is the C7. If you're going to use the additional classification application, if you are approved and the work experience is sufficient for the classification you've applied for, and let's say it's the D28, it can be added to your license almost right away because you don't have to take a test. There's no trade test for the D subcategory classifications, and you've already taken the law exam when you took the C7. So there would be no additional testing for you, Arturo. Just as long as you met the criteria with the trades, then we can go ahead and add that on upon review and acceptance of your application. So I don't see any more questions. So let's give us a few more minutes here to see if anybody has any other questions they'd like to be answered in this workshop. I would encourage everyone just to if you wanted additional information or if I didn't answer your question to your satisfaction, you could email us or, I would encourage you to go back and rewatch the workshop. It will be available on YouTube, and all our past ones are there also under our channel. They are a wealth of information. And you just can't go wrong with that. But you are welcome to send an email to us at licensing at cslb.ca.gov at any time. And if we can answer that question, depending upon the what's asked and what we're allowed to tell you. Again, we cannot pre-qualify you. We can't say, yes, you're going to receive this much on your degree without seeing it. I can't pre-look at your certificate of work experience before you send it in. You know, those are pre-qualifications. You do have to send it in, pay for your application like every applicant, and then we can go from there. David, after the application fee is cashed, how soon will we hear from CSLB? So right now, I'm going to say that most of our application units are in a backlog. So I'm going to say probably anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. We do have people working all the time. We are here Monday through Friday, so they are working their schedules, you know, Monday through Friday. We just have a high volume of applications, and right now, unfortunately, we do have probably about a 4 to 6 week backlog. David, I built a permitted 500 square foot building from foundation to roof for my parents. Their house is on a trust. I'm technically an owner. Should I file this as owner builder or a separate experience towards a general B? So if you file for owner builder, okay, there's a little bit of a different rule for owner builder. It's not based on years in that journey level profession, in that classification performing. We have a enforcement classification deputy. We do send these to him for review because he has a little bit of a different calculation, but it's not going to be based on time. Most of the time, it's going to be based on the square footage and how long it took you to do that. And of course, you know, if you submitted that as an owner builder, you would have to send in your finalized permits and your inspection reports for that. So it's completely up to you if you want to submit that or not. Again, it's not going to be based on time when you do owner builder. So if you only did it part-time, you know, it's your experience, you know, if it's granted, will be back in part-time. Because 500 square feet is not very big. So if it took you 2 years to build it, you know, obviously you're not going to get 2 years experience for that. So it is up to you how you want to send that in. Renee, with the B2, can I do work such as switching a light fixture only or fixing a faucet? So 3 unrelated trades for the B2. It is our handyman classification. You cannot just take on switching a light fixture or just fixing a faucet. It would have to be 3 unrelated trades. Same as the B, where you would have to have structural framing with 2 unrelated trades in order to take on a job. Renee, I'm confused on the part that says B2 can't take on a contract with less than 3 trades. So in order to take on 1 trade, Renee, let's say such as switching a light fixture, simple, right? If you're not messing with the electrical component of it, whether it be high voltage or low voltage, a C7 could do that. You know, a C10 could change the fixture. As a B2, though, you can't just do that because you're not a C7 or a C10, you're a B2. B2 is 3 unrelated trades. If you want more clarification, shoot me an email at licensing@cslb.ca.gov. Charles, thank you for answering my questions. Charles, if you need more information, you can always shoot us an email also. Again, we can't give you particulars or we can't guarantee, you know, but we can do our best to get you an answer so you can move forward with what you want to do. I have full documentation. Their name is on the permit as contractor for David. That's fine. If I remember correctly, I think it was they pulled the permit, but you're the owner builder. The thing is, when we look at it, again, we can't differentiate from what he did to what you did. I mean, it's going to be tricky for you to get credit for some of the work on there, depending upon the classification that you want to apply for. That was David McLean. So David Gutierrez, can a B2 contractor convert a garage to an ADU? That with 3 or more trades. So not if it's structural, not if you have to change the cosmetic structural component of the garage. You can't do anything that has to do with reframing. So if you had to retrofit a window, a door by changing the structure, load bearing, you would not be able to do that. Again, that would be a B. That would have to be a B. So it looks like I've scrolled down to the bottom of the questions again. Let's give you a few more minutes to see if anybody else wants to ask a question. Again, if you don't want to ask a question here, you can always send us an email at licensing@cslb.ca.gov. So maybe we want to do a few more minutes, but let's do maybe a couple more seconds or so. For the person who asked about the home improvement salesperson application, it is a $200 licensing fee to get that going. And then, or like I said, every 2 years, you'd have to renew it. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Brian. Okay, so that's all the time we have today for our workshop. Thank you for all your questions. If you have any other questions about your application, we encourage you to drop an email to our licensing division. Here is that email address. It's licensing@cslb.ca.gov. Again, that's licensing@cslb.ca.gov. If at some point you need to reschedule your exam, you can get that process started by dropping an email to exams with an S at the end at cslb.ca.gov. We've also put together a list of available resources for women considering a career in construction. If you haven't already, be sure to download the presentation to get them. You can download the presentation on a green banner on the top of our homepage, which is www.cslb.ca.gov. If you're watching the archive video of this workshop on our YouTube page, you'll find a link to the presentation down below. We welcome your comments or topics for future webcasts. Just drop us an email at social@cslb.ca.gov. Special thanks to our licensing division and public affairs office for their help on this workshop. The Get Licensed to Build workshop is a copyrighted production of the California Contractor State License Board. Thank you for watching.